This and That and What the Fuck Else, episode 86. In this one I'll be talking about NATO, some of the protests in Europe, and I've got some stuff about Putin, and then I've got some stuff about Russia and the UK. The Russian stuff is something that we should really just have an open mind, think about the information. The past week was a week of turmoil. There's a lot of things happening, and I'm struggling to stay up to date with my stuff, but I'm gonna get there. Fact is that there's so many of these weird things that are falling apart. It's quite obvious the pestilence story is heading to a nasty outcome for the guys that pushed that thing. And all over the world it's quite clear that this green program is also heading for the pits. But there are a committed crowd that push it like hell. And we have the COP27 thing that is creating more controversy than anything else. Then there's the madness of all the money that's being pumped into the Ukraine, and nobody really knows or understands exactly why the hell the West is bankrupting themselves in the Ukraine. But that is how it is. And then last night I stumbled onto a story of apparently a doctor in Malaysia that received the death penalty under the Nuremberg Code. Now I'm waiting to see if I get more info on that, but it does not look good. And then in Australia they're lining the guys up for another lockdown and the 5th round of jabs. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with the Aussies, but it seems to me they will line up and hold their arms until the whole population is gone. But that is it, how it is. We are living in a time that people will have to make hard decisions and then take the discomfort that comes with those decisions. What we're seeing in England is horrifying. England is falling apart, and I actually have a lot of empathy with the British people, but on the other hand, they allowed their leadership to do this to them. So let's kick off with this one. Bulgarians rallied against the desecration of the Soviet army monuments in Sofia. They defended their history by preventing Ukrainian activists and their Bulgarian supporters from pouring paint over it and wrapping it into yellow and blue. People also allowed their anti-NATO feelings to come forward at the rally. And we see there more and more of that in Europe happening. And then I've got this one, quite interesting. Sweden doesn't want to host nuclear weapons on its territory upon joining NATO. Well, looks like they are seeing the light, because this is going to turn nasty for those countries. It's quite clear, Russia is not going to tolerate NATO to put nuclear arms right on its border. It's just not going to happen. And we have this. NATO hopeful reveals stance on hosting nuclear arms. Sweden will not permit NATO to position nuclear weapons on its soil. It is still the long-term moderate party position to forbid nuclear arms on Swedish soil, Billström said, explaining we have never intended to change the condition for applications submitted by the previous government. Well, I don't know how they're going to handle it, but they are definitely cruising for cock there. Then we get to some protests, and this is in Australia. Demonstrations in support of Russia marched in the cities of Australia. People took to the streets holding placards, Russia is not our enemy, instead of sending weapons, send diplomacy. Russians know what the war is and how to win. In different corners of our planet, people understand the ongoing process and support Russia. And that is true. The Russian support is actually impressive. And then we've got this, Polish police protest demanding a pay rise. Thousands of police officers took part in a demonstration outside the Prime Minister's office, demanding higher pay and pensions. The protest was joined by other security service employees. Well, if you're a government with shit plans, you better be nervous when your security services starts protesting. French workers marched to demand wages keep up with inflation. Thousands of trade union workers took the streets in Paris to demand higher wages to keep up with inflation. The protest was part of a nationwide day of walkouts and transportation strikes by French train drivers and other public sector workers, which seriously disrupted traffic in the capital. But the sad part is the Americans are busy stealing the European industries. And these protesters are protesting for higher jobs. They will most probably by very soon find themselves without jobs at all. And then we've got this. I just put this in just to show the ridiculousness of some shit doesn't change. A gay parade in support of Ukraine in Taiwan. Fuck, that tells you a lot if the gays support you. In Italy, numerous rallies against the war have taken place. Italians took the streets of the capital under the slogan, Europe for Peace. They demanded to stop pumping Ukraine with weapons and stop the war. The sad part is, none of those European countries are sovereign anymore. They are being controlled by that cabal sitting in Brussels, a cabal that was never elected democratically, but controls all of their lives. And the citizens in Europe are going to pay for this. And then we get to Putin. Putin signed Russia's 17 traditional values into law. And I think it is a good thing just to focus, and maybe you can stop the video if you want to read this slowly and on your own time. But listen to what is contained in that. Here is the now official list of Russia's traditional values. Life, dignity, human rights and freedoms, patriotism, civic consciousness, serving the motherland and taking responsibility for its destiny, high moral ideals, solid family ties, constructive labor, priority of the spiritual over the material, humanism, compassion, justice, collectivism, mutual help and respect, historical memory and the continuity of generations, unity for Russia's people. Now, if you are a decent human being, and that in today's world means you are conservative, what in this list can you reject? And then just think about it. Your government, wherever you are, do they have these values? Answer that for yourself. And then we've got this piece. Orthodox Christianity has a special role in forming Russia's traditional values. Although the President's decree acknowledges inputs made by all of the country's main religions, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, and other religions, the document explains that unfriendly countries, corporations, and terrorists can harm Russia's traditional values by replacing them with their own. Think about that. And then we get to Dmitry Medvedev. The Western world can be fucking glad this guy is not the president of Russia. Dmitry Medvedev, what are we fighting for? Russia is a huge and rich country. We do not need foreign territories. We have everything in abundance. But there is our land, which is sacred to us, on which our ancestors lived and on which our people live today, and which we will not give to anyone. We protect our people. We are fighting for all our people, for our land, for our 1,000-year history. What is our weapon? Weapons are different. We have the opportunity to send all the enemies to a fiery Gehenna. But this is not our task. We listen to the words of the Creator in our hearts and obey them. These words give us a sacred purpose. The goal is to stop the supreme ruler of hell, no matter what name he uses, Satan, Lucifer, Iblis. For his goal is death. Our goal is life. His weapon is intricate lie, and our weapons are truth. That is why our cause is right. That is why victory will be ours. Happy holidays. And Think about these words. Once again, if you're a decent human being, think about these words. And then there was this tweet from J. Malkova. Moscow possesses weapons capable of hitting a target in any part of the globe, and not a single air defense system can prevent this. The Chinese edition of Baizhou reminded the West that Russia has an intercontinental ballistic missile Yars, the flight range 12,000 kilometers. The speed is Mach 14. The total explosive power is equivalent to 1,000,000 tons. That is how scary she is. Admiration from the authors of the publication. Now people should really take note of this. And they must stop with this shit that Russia wants to use nukes. Russia has got more than enough conventional weapons to wipe the West out. And this is a little bit for the Boere among my followers. All those guys that are so chuffed with their Toyota Land Cruisers. And don't misunderstand me. That Land Cruiser is a beast of a bucky. But look at the Russian equivalent. Look at it and drool. That is a truck. And this is just a little bit on the lighter side. Look at the scenery in Russia. And I follow somebody that travels around Russia and shows us parts of Russia where she visits. And it is stunning, the natural landscapes they have in that country. I wish I could go there. And what is more important, look at the quality of the water in those rivers. Not polluted. Look at that. I've seen those people camping. They scoop the water out of the rivers and they cook their food with it and they drink it and all of that. Think about your country. Can you still do that? Ilanda Rapids. It's unbelievably beautiful in the autumn in Altai. Altai is a Russian republic in the southern Siberia, whose terrain encompasses the Altai Mountains, surrounding tundra, alpine meadow, and thousands of lakes. It's beautiful. That video contained shots of waterfalls that was breathtaking. And this one is just a little bit, and I'm putting it in for that one follower I have that is a major Navalny supporter. But this guy, he is now doing his bit for the war effort. He's sitting there doing sewing machine work in jail. There's Navalny. I did some investigation into his background. That guy was selected by the CIA to do a color revolution in Moscow, and then things got out of hand and turned very bad for him. The CIA sponsored this up. That should tell you everything you should need. And then from Erdogan, the West attacks on Russia are without limits. The US and the West as a whole are attacking Russia almost without limits, prompting a natural defensive reaction, Turkish President Erdogan said on Saturday while returning from a summit of Turkic nations in Samarkand. And it is true, but let's see where it's going. Things look bad for the West, the collective West. Europe is plunging down the ravine. I don't think the European people understand where they're heading. And then there's some more from Dmitry Medvedev. Russia stands alone against NATO. Moscow stands alone in its battle against the US-led NATO military bloc and is capable of vanquishing its enemies on its own, Russia's former President Dmitry Medvedev said. Russia alone is fighting NATO and the Western world. Medvedev, who is the deputy head of the nation's Security Council and the leader of the ruling United Russia Party. We are capable of destroying a mighty enemy or alliances of enemies by ourselves, the former president stated, adding that during his military activities, Moscow is seeking to preserve the lives of its soldiers and civilians. And that is the truth. And we saw that with the Kherson withdrawal. The major reason why they pulled out of Kherson was the reality that if the Ukrainians and Americans and British managed to blow that Antonovsky Bridge, there's about 30,000 Russian troops that would have been cornered on the eastern side of the Dnieper River with very limited options for the Russian military to support them logistically, and they would have been wiped out. So they rather took that PR blow and pulled their soldiers out. And then we see this. US fears of European countries' rejection of sanctions against Russia. Politico. There is growing concerns in the US government over the possible refusal of its European allies to support sanctions pressure on Russia. Unnamed US officials who work in Europe have recently seen increasingly warning their counterparts in the United States that some countries whose populations support Russia are increasingly angry about sanctions and accuse the United States of increasing spending, the newspaper notes. And that is the reality. And it looks like the people are beginning to wake up to this. The fucking Americans pushed the sanctions and Brussels executed. But look at the American side. They excludes a hell of a lot of Russian stuff from sanctions to America. A hell of a lot. But the stupid Europeans cut their own throats. According to Politico sources, because of the public outcry, European leaders may refuse to support anti-Russian sanctions. Politico says that any weakening of sanctions would give the Kremlin more leverage. According to Politico sources, the growing concerns prompted a barrage of calls to the US presidential administration to discuss ways to keep European countries committed to Washington's sanction strategy. Nevertheless, a senior US official called the situation shaky but stable for now. And that is how they work. But the Europeans are going to pay dearly for this. In early October, the EU approved the 8th package of sanctions. One of the main measures of it was a cap on the price of oil. The price ceiling for crude oil will come into force on December 5, and for petroleum products on February 5, 2023. The European Commission then noted that the measures was developed in close coordination with the G7, which includes the United States. These people don't have a reverse gear, but they will take their citizens to hell. And the first batch of citizens that are going to get severely fucked up is the guys in Britain. Also, within the frames of the package, the EU strengthened restrictions on import and export. EU countries are prohibited to import finished and semi-finished products made of steel, machines and equipment, plastic, vehicles, textiles, footwear, etc. from Russia. In addition, the EU has restricted export of European goods to Russia, including electronic chips. But these things are busy backfiring like hell. And as a bonus, Europe is being deindustrialized. I just wonder what those people think. Where will those millions work? And then we get to the UK. The UK to increase support for Ukraine. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told Reuters that London will boost its support for Kiev through the winter season. Winter is approaching and that's an important challenge for both skies, he said. We are determined to give Ukrainian soldiers the best basic skills because we already know that the Russian military aren't doing that. The UK government announced the delivery of a further 12,000 extreme cold weather sleeping kits for Ukraine. It said it would soon complete the delivery of 1,000 additional surface-to-air missiles. The stupid fucking Brits. Their country is in tatters, as Ursula would say. In tatters, I tell you. But they pump money and shit into the Ukraine. What the fuck does the UK have to do with Ukraine? The UK is an island sitting there on the other side of Europe, far away from the Ukraine. But they prance around like they are the #1 global force that can do anything. And then we get this. UK hunger crisis deepens as Foodbanks face collapse. Demand for food from charities is by far outstripping supply, according to the Trussell Trust, which far more than 250,000 Brits turning to them for help in the last 6 months. Foodbanks have warned winter will be the hardest yet, with parents already trying to sell stuff all the time just to find £10, as people turn to local clubs to get free tea, and the Feed the Future campaign calls on government to extend free school meals. Nearly 2 million children now receive free sustenance from authorities, but Education Minister Gillian Keegan has vowed the growing problem is always under review, and yet they have billions of pounds to pump into the Ukraine, and their own people are starving. I am sorry to say, the Europeans will have to go and sit in a little dark cupboard and meditate, and then go and look at history and go far back into their history so that they can learn how citizens had to get rid of killer regimes. But I don't know if the British still have the balls for it. And then you look at this, and I've done that Skidmark on the UK that has been colonized. Look at this, look at these numbers. Ethnicity of school pupils within London, and that's 21-22. White British, 24%. Britain, you guys can read the rest of this. Stop it and read it and see it, look at that. I'm going to tell you, 24% of the students in the schools are white British. You are screwed. You have been invaded and colonized, and your governor has been appointed, and he is sitting there taking his instructions from King Swab, and you guys will have to learn to adapt and conduct yourselves as good natives of a colonized country. You are done. And then we get to that what a fuck moment, and this is part of that theme. I have spoken about similar situations of this. I've showed you the Joe Biden thing. Now, look at this face, look at those two pictures, and just ask yourself, what the fuck is going on there? That is supposed to be the same girl. And I would say the eyes is the same, and the nose bridge is the same, but that's where it stops. Look at that jawline. Guys, I don't know what's going on, but we better keep our eyes open. We are being fed bullshit every day. And on that lekker note, hit the like and the subscribe, and please share the thing. Thank you for your support.